Here we go. Busman's holiday. A form of recreation involving doing the same as what one does at work. Yeah, that sounds about right. I apologise for there being no video last week, but it was my birthday, so I had to take my yearly week off, and yes, you've guessed it, to visit churches and play their organs, but just without a camera. However, I'm feeling fresh and ready for the next 51 videos, and there has been one very significant development, the best birthday present a man could ever ask for. I think we have a treat in store today. Oh dear. I'd hoped to start this walk a little bit further back on the footpath, but there is a horde of magnificent beasts staring right at me, one of whom seems to take a keen interest in what I'm doing, so I think I'll leave them to it and begin on this charming solitary path here as we head towards a village called Horningsham, which is the gateway to the estate Longleat. So perhaps cows are not so bad after all. Haven't seen any lions yet. Let me tell you about organ playing though. Organ playing consists of two things, practice and performance. Crikey. You can't have practice without performance, and you can't really have performance without practice. If you go and play for a concert without practicing, you'll sound dreadful. And if you don't perform, there's hardly any point learning the organ in the first place. Even for somebody like me who really hates live performance, I would still say that the fulfillment outweighs the pain. However, I found a neat little compromise, which is to perform on YouTube for you, and I much prefer it. And this is what today's video is all about. It's about the difference between practice and performance, and I think I've got the perfect church to show you that. Just like organ playing, walking has been at the centre of my life for as long as I can remember. I've always relished in peace and fresh air, especially in places I've never seen before. Horningsham, like so many of our beautiful villages, is blessed with its own parish church. So it's here that my loves of the countryside and of music intertwine. Wow. I can just make out the road to the main entrance of Longleat on my left, but the scenery completely opens up here on the hillside to reveal St John the Baptist Church in Horningsham. What an amazing sight! One of the most impressive churches I think I've ever seen. It's extremely imposing, isn't it? I expect you can see the tower of this church from Longleat. If only I had a zoom lens. Actually, like most country houses, they very cleverly built Longleat so that they can see everything, but we can't see them. And I think the weather today is just perfect to explore this church. I love a moody sky to investigate an ancient church. This church actually isn't that ancient. It's a bit of the Trigger's Broom complex here, because though the tower dates from the 15th century and the church was first recorded in the 13th, most of what you see is a Victorian rebuild, but they did a fantastic job. They enlarged this church to suit the growing population of the village. I have to see the view first. It's all part of the experience. So this is exactly the kind of building that you would come to if you were just starting out learning the church organ. I can hardly see the door. St. John's is an enormous church. There are rays of colour coming from the window here in the chancel, but if you look above, you just get complete blackness. And this magnificent structure called a hammer beam roof, inspired by Gothic architecture, but this is, of course, Victorian. I'm not used to churches this big, actually. I normally visit much smaller buildings. There's even a gallery at the back to seat more people. That's where you'd expect to find the pipe organ, wouldn't you? But we'll have to delve deeper to find it here. So imagine that you are learning to play the church organ. You probably don't have your own instrument at home. You're very lucky if you do. In normal circumstances, you'd have to come to a church like this where you'd have an agreement with the vicar or the church warden to spend a few hours a week practicing, and this is exactly the kind of instrument that you'd play. In the gloom of the transept here, this is a standard village church organ, and although I haven't heard it yet, almost looks too small for this church, especially pointing as it is inwards rather than out into the nave. Above the console it says, built in 1887 by William Hill, organ builder of London. Now that's confusing, because I've done some research, and if I head over to the history board, I expect it might help us out here, or rather add to the confusion. Let me see. Anything about the organ? Oh, here we go. So Wyatt, who was the Victorian architect who enlarged this place, Wyatt's plan shows that the choir vestry was originally open and filled with 5 pews. The organ was bought in 1860, which doesn't tie in with the date written on the console. So we must assume that the vestry was created soon after this. The instrument was paid for by public subscription, including a generous donation from Lord Bath, who of course lived in Longleat, and his descendant still does. It cost £120, and in the back of the accounts book is a list of those who contributed. And then it says, it is a 2-manual instrument built by Willis of London. Yes, puzzling. So the console says William Hill of London, but the history board says Henry Willis. Do you think the confusion came from the fact that the initials are the same if you swap them round, and that both of those builders are very famous? Perhaps. I don't know who built this. Who was it, Hill or Willis? Willis was the better organ builder, I would say, more famous probably. He built the organ in the Royal Albert Hall and in Salisbury Cathedral, Truro Cathedral, and many others, of course. William Hill tended to build slightly smaller instruments, like the one at St. Martin's Church, which you've heard me play. I think this is a Willis. Cast your mind back a couple of years to the organ in St. Gregory's Church in Salisbury. It looked very similar to this, with the same kind of pipework, whereas William Hill's pipes tend to be painted in a kind of blue colour with patterns and decorations. This looks more like a Willis to me. Right, let's see how it sounds now. So imagine that you're a first-time organist and you've come in to do some practice. This is what you find, an instrument where you can barely see where you're putting your feet. You have to make sure you don't trip over anything. And you need to get some practice done. It's very, very difficult in these circumstances. And of course, if you look behind, if somebody comes in, you'll hear the door go, which will absolutely terrify you. But you'll be completely isolated up here in the corner. Not the best way of practicing to learn an instrument. Organs like this are magnificent when it comes to hymns. That's what they were designed for, and here we seem to have found a historic gem. But when we turn to organ repertoire, the kind of music I learnt at university and orchestral arrangements, I must confess that here, as in other places, I begin to feel claustrophobic. Don't get me wrong, folks, I absolutely love playing village church organs. But this one really displays all of the problems which I face when I'm trying to perform, but also to show you how I practice. It's very dark in here. I can't get a camera into this space very easily. Everything always feels a bit rushed as well, because there's lots to do in a short amount of time, and I can't actually lift the camera off of its tripod and then talk to you very easily, so things have to be done at different times. Basically, it's inconvenient, but also all organs are different. This one's actually in quite good tuning, but it's very hard to demonstrate specific points about a piece of music sat at the console, which has led me to a new development. Many of you will know that for about 15 years I've been using an ancient Viscount crescendo as my practice organ. It took me through ABRSM exams and into university, but it's so old and primitive that it could hardly be used for YouTube recordings. So I've come to Viscount's studio in Bicester, near Oxford, to try out the new instruments, and I can't believe how far they've come. And with that, I am sold. But as it turns out, I wasn't sold anything at all, because the company very kindly offered to lend me one of these instruments, both for my own personal practice and also for demonstrations here on YouTube, which is fantastic. In the past, as you know, if I've wanted to analyse a piece of music, well, in order to play tiny snippets from it, I've had to use an electric piano, or I've had to physically bring the harmonium here and use that. And neither are really appropriate, are they? However, now, if I want to explain a specific element from a piece of music, or I want to perform for you something which is inspired by one of these village churches, but which cannot be played on its own instrument, well, I have the freedom to play it. So combining my trips to the churches with this instrument at home, I think this channel will become very exciting indeed. Viscount organs use a technology called physis to simulate the real physics of air blowing through pipes. In that sense, it brings me full circle to my roots as a synthesizer player. With careful modelling, an instrument like this one brings us as close as possible to the sound of a real pipe organ. So it offers me freedom to compose, record, and practice, all from the comfort of my music room. I'm sure that this organ will be in use every single week on this channel. In fact, it definitely will, because I'm going to use it to practice all of the music. But for now, I just want to introduce it to you with 3 pieces, all inspired by my trip to Horningsham. You will remember that a few minutes ago I played you just a part of the rondo from Abdelaza by Purcell. This is really tricky to play on a village church organ, and the reason is because it's written for melody, accompaniment and bass, which is quite difficult to do on a small village church organ. You have only a few stops, so there isn't very much flexibility about the sound. That means it can sometimes be difficult to bring out the melody. But also you can't really review the stops very easily without going back to your microphone, listening to it from the nave, and then going back and adjusting. It's very difficult to get the balance right. However, on a larger instrument you have more choice. The Viscount organ really replicates a large parish church organ or a cathedral organ. What do you do when you're faced with a larger organ? Well, the most basic way of setting up a church organ is to decide which stops to use. Very carefully choose the sounds you like and which balance well. And do this for each of the keyboards that you're going to be playing. And then you'd normally write those stops down on the score so you don't forget them. This is Purcell's Rondo from Abdelaza. Rondo from Abdelazer by Henry Purcell. So you can see the difference between the village organ and the larger symphonic organ, I suppose you could call it. The Viscount really models a larger organ where there are separate keyboards with their own distinct sounds. These instruments are perhaps more orchestral, and so they really do justice to some of the bigger organ works, but also orchestral arrangements. The organs in the villages, by contrast, were really built to play hymns. When I first started making YouTube videos, you know as well as I do that it consisted of me walking into a church, perhaps talking a little bit about the history, and then playing a couple of pieces on the organ there. Sometimes you would suggest, "Ben, could you just show us a bit of the graveyard?" Or my parents would say, "Maybe talk about the organ stops a bit more, that's interesting." And so I was spurred on to keep making videos which were more comprehensive each time. What has happened this year has been that I've started to analyse music more. And that's where I feel my real enthusiasm lies. I'm absolutely fascinated by music. But I also love walking in the countryside, and like you, I love discovering new musical instruments. But now, with this Viscount organ, I feel that I can really begin to paint a picture of the churches in a more three-dimensional way than I could before. So I am very excited and very grateful to Viscount for their help. I'd like to end with two pieces. One from St. John's and one from Viscount Ben's. First of all, we have a hymn, "Praise My Soul, the King of Heaven," and then to finish, the theme from Dvorak's New World Symphony with views of the sunshine across from Horningsham Church. If you're new to this channel and you want to see where my travels take me next, well, do just subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. You've just got to click that button, but it's really the best way to keep up to date with my videos. If you'd like to, you can also support me financially using my PayPal link just underneath this video. If you click on it, then it takes you to the Salisbury Organist donations page, and from there you can leave a small contribution. If you're enjoying today's music and if you'd like to help support me. People sometimes ask me, "Who is your camera person?" And I tell you, there is no camera person. I am filming all of the scenery, but I'm also filming myself, and I'm in charge of script writing, preparation, research, and everything else which goes into making these videos. So I'd be really grateful for your support. Thank you. So, without further ado, let's end with two beautiful organ pieces on two fantastic instruments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio!